The hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're not going to be in the known. You're stepping out into the unknown. You're doing something differently. And the body, which has been conditioned to be the mind, the servant is now the master. So the body loves the familiar known. It loves the same suffering. It loves the same pain. It loves the same unworthiness. It's been conditioned that way for years on end. It really is running the show. So the moment you step out into the unknown, the body goes, wait a second, I'd rather feel guilty than this feeling of the unknown because I can't predict my future. So the body starts influencing the mind, and then we start to hear this chatter in our head that says, well, I can start tomorrow. Tomorrow's a better day. You really don't feel like it today. Why don't you just have one piece of cake? You're a loser. It's your parents' fault. It's your ex's fault. It's your culture's fault, whatever it is. And if we accept, believe, and surrender to that thought as if it's the truth, that's an old circuit in the brain. That thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same feeling or emotion. The person says, well, this feels right to me. No, that feels familiar. Crossing the river of change, going from the old self to the new self, there is a neurological, a biological, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self.
Your every thought produces a biochemical reaction in the brain. The brain then releases chemical signals that are transmitted to the body, where they act as the messengers of the thought. The thoughts that produce the chemicals in the brain allow your body to feel exactly the way you were just thinking. So every thought produces a chemical that is matched by a feeling in your body. Essentially, when you think happy, inspiring, or positive thoughts, your brain manufactures chemicals that make you feel joyful, inspired, or uplifted. For example, when you anticipate an experience that is pleasurable, the brain immediately makes a chemical neurotransmitter called dopamine, which turns the brain and body on in anticipation of that experience and causes you to begin to feel excited. If you have hateful, angry, or self-deprecating thoughts, the brain also produces chemicals called neuropeptides that the body responds to in a comparable way. You feel hateful, angry, or unworthy. You see, your thoughts immediately do become matter. When the body responds to a thought by having a feeling, this initiates a response in the brain. The brain, which constantly monitors and evaluates the status of the body, notices that the body is feeling a certain way. In response to that bodily feeling, the brain generates thoughts that produce corresponding chemical messengers. You begin to think the way you are feeling. Thinking creates feeling, and then feeling creates thinking in a continuous cycle. This loop eventually creates a particular state in the body that determines the general nature of how we feel and behave. We will call this a state of being. For example, suppose a person lives much of her life in a repeating cycle of thoughts and feelings related to insecurity. The moment she has a thought about not being good enough or smart enough or enough of anything, her brain releases chemicals that produce a feeling of insecurity. Now she's feeling the way she was just thinking. Once she's feeling insecure, she then will begin to think the way she was just feeling. In other words, her body is now causing her to think. This thought leads to more feelings of insecurity. And so the cycle perpetuates itself. If this person's thoughts and feelings continue year after year to generate the same biological feedback loop between her brain and her body, she will exist in a state of being that is called insecure. The more we think the same thoughts, which then produce the same chemicals, which cause the body to have the same feelings, the more we physically become modified by our thoughts. In this way, depending on what we are thinking and feeling, we create our state of being. What we think about and the energy or intensity of these thoughts directly influences our health, the choices we make, and ultimately our quality of life.
How would an abundant person think? Write it down, dude, and fire and wire those thoughts in your brain and install the hardware. Keep doing it with attention and intention, it becomes the new voice in your head. It becomes a software program. Then say, okay, how am I going to be in my life today? What would an abundant person, how would they behave? And before you reach for your cell phone and start scrolling through your social media, close your eyes and rehearse in your mind how that person would walk, how they would breathe, how they would smile, how they would greet people, how they would be on Zoom calls, how would they be in traffic, how would they be at dinner. And the act of closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing the act, if you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. In fact, just a little bit of time, you start to install the neurological hardware to look like you already did it. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past, it's primed for the future. Keep doing it, keep rehearsing. No different than playing an instrument, no different than learning how to dance, no different than learning how to act or play a sport. Everybody's always rehearsing, right? The rehearsal process changes the brain to look like you've already done it, you've already experienced it. Now what's the essential part of that? The hardware is in place. Now all you gotta do is step into the footprint. Keep doing it, it becomes a software program. You start acting like an abundant person. Everything changes. Your energy changes, your mood changes, the way you walk, the way you breathe, your posture changes. You're out of the known, right?
Yes.
You gotta condition the body now emotionally into the future.
Conscious thoughts, repeated often enough, become unconscious thinking. In a common example of this, we must consciously think about our every action while we are learning to drive. After much practice, we can drive 100 miles from point A to point B and not remember any part of the trip because our subconscious mind is typically at the wheel. We've all experienced being in an unaware state during a routine drive, only to feel our conscious mind re-engaging in response to an unusual engine sound or the rhythmic thump of a flat tire. So if we continually entertain the same thoughts, they'll start off as conscious ones, but they'll ultimately become unconscious. Automatic thought programs. There's a sound explanation in neuroscience for how this happens. These unconscious ways of thinking become our unconscious ways of being, and they directly affect our lives just as conscious thoughts do. Just as all thoughts set off biochemical reactions that lead to behavior, our repetitive, unconscious thoughts produce automatic, acquired patterns of behavior that are almost involuntary. These behavioral patterns are habits, and most surely, they become neurologically hardwired in the brain. It takes awareness and effort to break the cycle of a thinking process that has become unconscious. First, we need to step out of our routine so we can look at our lives. Through contemplation and self-reflection, we can become aware of our unconscious scripts. Then, we must observe these thoughts without responding to them so that they no longer initiate the automatic chemical responses that produce habitual behavior. Within all of us, we possess a level of self-awareness which can observe our thinking. We must learn how to be separate from these programs, and when we do, we can willfully have dominion over them. We can exercise control over our thoughts. In doing so, we are neurologically breaking apart thoughts that have become hardwired in our brain. Since we know from neuroscience that thoughts produce chemical reactions in the brain, it would make sense then that our thoughts would have some effect on our physical body by changing our internal state. Not only do our thoughts matter in how we live out our life, but our thoughts become matter right within our own body. Thoughts matter. Out of their belief that thoughts are real and that the way people think directly impacts their health and their lives, these individuals saw that their own thinking processes were what had gotten them into trouble. They began to examine their life analytically. When they became inspired and diligent about changing their thinking, they were able to revitalize their health. A new attitude can become a new habit.
To become abundant, we have to overcome the old personality. And that's 95% of who we are, right?
Yes.
So then, the side effect of the beginning of this process is a lot of discomfort. It is a lot of discomfort because you're stepping outside the known into the unknown, and now you can't predict.
It's scary.
No, you'd rather hold on to your lack.
The pain, the suffering.
Rather tell the story of that. At least it makes you feel something that's familiar. When you step outside and you're saying, I'm not going to complain about money any longer. I'm not going to complain about I don't have any. I'm not going to judge other people who do. I'm not going to say I can. I'm not worthy. It's never going to work. All those things got to go. I'm not going to feel lack. I'm not going to feel unworthy. I'm not going to feel separation. I'm not going to feel resentment. These are the things that are keeping my reality the same. Now it's no longer about abundance, about who you become. So the overcoming process becomes the becoming process. And so many people come to this work. They want abundance. They want healing. They want a new relationship. They want a new career. They want the mystical, but really they want wholeness. And
they want healing. They want peace.
They want wholeness.
Because they feel unwhole.
Well, when you're in lack or you're in separation, you're not whole. Imagine feeling so much wholeness that's impossible to want. That's what we're working on with people. Then you can really enjoy a sunset. Then you can really enjoy a meal. Then you can really enjoy your friends.
Our routine known thoughts and feelings perpetuate the same state of being, which creates the same behaviors and creates the same reality. So, if we want to change some aspect of our reality, we have to think, feel, and act in new ways. We have to be different in terms of our responses to experiences. We have to become someone else. Have to create a new state of mind. We need to observe a new outcome with that new mind. From a quantum standpoint, we have to create a different state of being as an observer and generate a new electromagnetic signature. When we do, we will match a potential reality in the field that exists only as an electromagnetic potential. Once that match exists between who we are being, what we are broadcasting in the electromagnetic potential in the field, we will be pulled toward that potential reality, or it will find us. I know that it's frustrating when life seems to produce an endless succession of minor variations on the same negative outcomes. But as long as you stay the same person, as long as your electromagnetic signature remains the same, you can't expect a new outcome. To change your life is to change your energy, to make an elemental change in your mind and emotions. If you want a new outcome, you will have to break the habit of being yourself and reinvent a new self. What do your state of being and a laser have in common? A laser is an example of a very coherent signal. When physicists talk about a coherent signal, they're referring to a signal made up of waves that are in phase. Their troughs, low points, and crests, high points, are parallel. When those waves are coherent, they are much more powerful. Waves in a signal are either aligned or unaligned, coherent or incoherent. The same goes for your thoughts and feelings. How many times have you tried to create something, thinking in your mind that the end result was possible, but feeling in your heart that it wasn't? What was the result of that incoherent or out-of-phase signal that you were sending? Why is it that nothing manifested? If your intentions and desires haven't produced consistent results, you've probably been sending an incoherent mixed message into the field. You may want wealth, you may think wealthy thoughts, but if you feel poor, you aren't going to attract financial abundance to yourself. Why not? Because thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. You're thinking one way and feeling another way. And when the mind is in opposition to the body, or vice versa, the field won't respond in any consistent way. Instead, when mind and body are working together, when our thoughts and feelings are aligned, when we are in a new state of being, then we are sending a coherent signal on the airwaves of the invisible. Now, let's fill in another piece of the puzzle. To change our reality, those outcomes that we attract to ourselves have to surprise, even astonish us in the way in which they come about. We should never be able to predict how our new creations will manifest. They must catch us off guard. They have to wake us up from the dream of the routine reality that we've grown accustomed to. These manifestations should leave us with no doubt that our consciousness made contact with the quantum field of intelligence. So we are inspired to do this again. That is the joy of the creative process. Why should you want a quantum surprise? If you can predict an event, it is nothing new. It's routine, automatic, and you have experienced it many times before. If you can predict it the same, you produce the same familiar outcome. In fact, if you're trying to control how an outcome will occur, you just went Newtonian. Newtonian, classical. Physics was about trying to anticipate and predict events. It was all about cause and effect. What does going Newtonian mean when applied to your ability to create? It's when the external environment is controlling your internal environment, thinking, feeling. That's cause and effect. Instead, change your internal environment, the way you think and feel, and then see how the external environment is altered by your efforts. Strive to create an unknown, new future experience. Then, when an unforeseen event occurs in your favor, you will be pleasantly surprised. You just became a quantum creator. You just went from cause and effect to causing effect, told a clear intention of what you want, but leave the how details to the unpredictable quantum field. Let it orchestrate an event in your life in a way that is just right for you. If you're going to expect anything, expect the unexpected. Surrender, trust, and let go of how the desired event will unfold. This is the biggest hurdle for most to overcome, because we human beings always want to control a future reality by trying to recreate how it occurred in a past reality.